What's up, party people? This is Max&Max, where we've got all the facts. Well, mostly. I'm your host, Max.
I'm also Max.
We have limited education and limited expertise. However, we are your exclusive experts in just one thing.
That is reading a bunch of random stuff to you.
All right, today's topic is U.S. presidents and the Curse of Tippacanoe. Max is going to start you off with General Ulysses S. Grant. Take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. I feel like not many people know too much about Grant as a president, as he is kind of overshadowed by his predecessor for very obvious reasons. Abraham Lincoln was a very well-known guy.
Really? No. Can you tell me about him? I haven't heard of him.
Maybe later.
Okay, yeah, maybe later.
But, okay, so Grant's early career started at West Point. Obviously a very large army school. He specifically actually did not want to go there right away. He was forced into it by his dad. He enrolled into the army under USS Hiram. Well, he actually didn't enroll into the army as USS Hiram because his acronym would have been HUG. So he went in as USS S. Grant. No one actually knows what the S stands for, and he claims it stands for nothing. Will we ever really know? Not really. Maybe he thought of it. Just was like, all right, okay. I'm going to just completely change my name.
Yeah, it's not even his name. Can I throw in something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
The S is rumored. It was always rumored. This is completely hearsay, but it was rumored to stand for Sam. And that is like the rumored origin for Uncle Sam.
Yes, that actually came, he was known as Uncle Sam Grant during his time at the academy. So he ended up finishing 21st out of 36 in his class, which, isn't that high for someone of a pretty standing reputation in the Army. However, he would go on to fight in the Mexican-American War as his first real, battles and stuff. And he fought specifically only as a first lieutenant. He never got a promotion beyond that during his time in the Mexican-American War, even though he did distinguish himself in a battle in September 1847, earning brevet commissions from his captain and another first lieutenant. He would later, however, get a promotion to captain in August 1853, which assigned him to Fort Humboldt, California. I probably butchered that.
You said it as good as I could say.
Fair enough.
So he fought in Mexico.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't know about that war. We could do a whole special about that.
We could. He actually fought with Robert E. Lee, and Robert E. Lee did not really give an absolute shit about Grant. That would come to bite his fucking ass.
Yeah, maybe he should have wised up to that guy.
Yeah. Eventually, he resigned from the Army in April 11th, 1854, only a few years before he would rejoin it. This was because of his heavy drinking up in the fort, as he was very bored up there. Oh. And that was really all he felt he could cure his boredness with. And he also missed his family, specifically his wife. Didn't really get to see them whatsoever. As at that time, you didn't really have leave. You were just stationed at a place for a certain amount of months, sometimes even years, and then eventually you could go home or get shipped off somewhere else. And your family couldn't follow you because that isn't really what the military did back then.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was slightly important in the Civil War.
Just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit. Didn't really do that much. But His first notable campaigns in the Civil War were really in the Western theater. I had to do Never Eat Soggy Wheat to get that together.
So he went from being a first lieutenant forever to being promoted to captain.
Yes.
Promoted to captain, quitting, jumping back,
Yes.
gets promoted to general, and then is picked by Lincoln,
Yes.
who I'm going to be talking about later. Lincoln picks him to be in charge of the Union.
Yep.
And then he's just off to the races in 1861 when the war started out in the West.
So he didn't actually get general right away. He was under a general as a captain. He got reinstated as a captain, I believe. And he continuously slightly defied his orders because he wanted to push the South and the West, because the West along the Mississippi, they had the gunboats over there, and they were like strategically valuable in taking over the forts in the area. He was the first to recognize how important these gunboats were, and he was working alongside.
That the Confederates were using?
No, that we were using.
Okay.
We would push the ironclads down the rivers and essentially bombard their forts on the coast of the Mississippi. And he and an admiral became friends at the time, and they just kind of continuously kept working together to essentially secure the entire Mississippi, which ended up leading to his eventual promotion by Lincoln and his full-on recognition by Lincoln during that time. And then you would see, obviously, he gets transferred over to the Eastern Theater. Sherman takes over the Western Theater. The road to Atlanta is what Sherman did, I believe. But Grant then goes into, I believe it was known as the Wildlands in Virginia, where Robert E. Lee and the Confederates were very, very strong.
That's where the Confederates were strongest in Virginia.
Yes,
and
yes.
which is really close to D.C.
Yes, very close.
Where the president was, where Lincoln was.
Lee ended up controlling these wildlands, and they were like his hunting grounds. Like any Union soldier that went through there was like he considered dead, because he and his men held that area very strongly. Eventually, Stonewall Jackson fell, which ended up causing a ripple effect of E losing one of his best generals, which ended up pushing him down further south. And eventually you get the signing of the peace treaty in the
Appomattox courthouse.
Yes.
Eventually, 1865.
Yes, by Lee to Grant, a person that Lee obviously overlooked as a non-important figure who absolutely fucking handed his fucking ass to him consistently. So that's kind of just a general history of his first few years as a political figure. I'd say his promotion to a general is pretty political in its own ways.
Yeah. They repelled the Confederacy and led to the end of the Civil War.
Yeah. And then you have the assassination of Lincoln, and Johnson takes over for Lincoln. This was during the Reconstruction era. Grant ends up falling out with Johnson, even though Johnson had promoted him to Secretary of Defense, I believe. He fell out with him specifically because he felt Johnson was not doing enough against the Confederates at the time and the terrorism that was going on in the South.
Yeah, I mean, this topic we're discussing is presidents, and there's a lot of shit that presidents have done recently in the past. Johnson, Vice President Johnson, Andrew Johnson, became president after Lincoln was assassinated.
Yes.
He was, the reason that Lincoln picked him was because Lincoln wanted, I mean, I'm going to talk about that later, but Lincoln was, he wanted to prove that he wasn't completely against the South, and Johnson was from the South, so you could imagine his beliefs. And he was super sympathetic to the South, even after they had been in full rebellion and killed, tens of thousands of Americans.
Yes.
People died. It's crazy, and he was still sympathetic to them.
Yeah, Johnson was not great. Immediately, when the election was held, Grant ended up running and winning the Electoral College by a margin of 214 to 80, which I think it's high. That's high for a time like that. After a war so large, and I believe the South was still voting in U.S. elections at that time.
Yeah, after the Civil War ended,
They pretty much got...
there's a whole, we can talk about the Civil War for hours.
Yes.
The After the Civil War, Johnson actually established a policy that was if 10% of the citizenry who could vote wanted to be readmitted to the Union because they had seceded, they had voted to secede, and so they weren't allowed to vote. Hence why Lincoln was able to pass the 13th and 14th Amendments with the Congress that was held by the radical Republicans and the war Democrats. But they were able to pass all of those things because the southern states weren't voting. They were in the rebellion. They had seceded. But Johnson was so sympathetic. 10% of the citizenry of states of Alabama, Georgia, Texas, if 10% wanted back in, they'd let them back in. Yep. So it took only a couple of years for them to get fully readmitted.
Yeah, and then you wonder, why there were still even 80 electoral seats against Grant. Like, he obviously could have won by a lot higher margin without that 10% readmission.
Right. It was probably a complete landslide in the North.
He ended up receiving a 52% popular vote. This is a man who indeed still slaughtered the South, and the North did hold the higher population, but one could assume that some people in the South did vote for Grant. However, do not believe African Americans at the time had the right to vote until Grant set up the 15th Amendment, specifically giving African American men the right to vote. This was ratified under him. He then went on to sign legislation that was specifically aimed at destroying the, at the time, KKK. This man was hard as hell against the South. Hated them with a passion. This man married a Southern woman as well. Like, he lived in the South for a very long time. However, he had no sympathy because his father was an abolitionist, which led Grant to become a abolitionist as well. He also stationed federal troops inside of the South, which was probably, and I think overtly, you can see in history, one of the smartest moves that man made, simply because it allowed these African American men to get into political seats in the South. That was the only time for like almost 100 years where African American men were able to hold political office simply because he protected them consistently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there needs to be credit to those African American civil rights leaders who were advocating for themselves and petitioning.
Yes.
And people fighting to free, abolitionists of all types.
Mm-hmm.
That goes, hopefully without saying, but
yes.
I think it should still be said. And Grant was. That is interesting. That's amazing.
It does still take a lot for
Reconstruction was still a mess, though. I mean,
yes.
It was. I mean, it because the KKK came to power, came in some fashion.
Yeah, they only came back in 1915 though.
Yeah.
It took them about 50 years to reorganize and claim themselves as a successor almost to the KKK, as we aren't even sure if they were actually KKK members during that time, or if Grant had actually successfully rooted out the entire terrorist organization.
Yeah, it's shocking that they killed, John Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln.
Yes.
Johnson gets in there. Everyone hates him. They elect Grant. But then, surprisingly, they didn't kill Grant. I guess they might have been too scared of him. I don't know.
Yeah. It was, I feel like, in a lot of sense, you had Abraham Lincoln. Johnson completely flipped his whole view towards the South from Lincoln's. And then you get a whole nother 180 with Grant on his view towards the South. He also was the president who established the Department of Justice. He also created the Weather Bureau, now known as the National Weather Service.
Noah? He made Noah?
Apparently.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Look at him go.
Yeah, he was doing stuff. He was signing papers. He was signing a lot of papers. Threw that name on everything. You saw it and it went through. He also created Yellowstone National Park. I don't know how many people know this.
Yellowstone?
Yes, America's first national park.
I'll be damned.
Yes, everyone I think thinks Teddy did that. But no, it's Grant. He obviously got involved into a few scandals, specifically the appointment of one of his friends to two of his friends, James Fisk and James Gould, who attempted to influence and manipulate the gold market. How fitting for a man named Gold to try and screw over the gold market.
He appointed them to what?
He appointed them to, what does it say? I think it was the treasury position, specifically.
And they tried to, pocket some gold. Grant.
They were trying to...
You were doing so good, buddy.
Yeah. It failed, but it created financial panic known as Black Friday.
Yeah.
Black Friday.
But bad black.
Yeah, bad Black Friday. Yeah. But Black Friday.
I'll be damned.
He also had the whiskey ring, which went on, which was exposed in 1875 and involved a network of distilleries, distributors, and public officials who conspired to defraud the federal government of millions of dollars of liquor tax. I wish they had done better, but we have to pay taxes on liquor still.
They tried.
True heroes. We can see why Grant liked these guys.
Yeah. Tell him. You're gonna tell him about the cigars thing.
Grant. To kind of loop back.
He wasn't just a drinker, people.
No. He specifically smoked a ridiculous amount of cigars. We're going to loop back a little bit to the kind of finish this off on a slightly funnier note, but. During the Civil War, there was a picture of Grant taken, or a illustration made of him holding and smoking a cigar. And during the war, he had almost unwavering support in the North. So all the people just decided to start shipping in cigars to Grant, just mailing as many as they could. And he was smoking these for pretty much his entire life, because the entire North was like, we need to get this man cigars now.
Oh man, iconic.
Yes.
All right, party people, it's time for the legend, the man, the myth, the freak. He was a freak. He was 6'4", coming in 193 centimeters. Guy was a big guy, wore a hat. It's him. It's the one, the only Honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln, born in the year 1809 in Lithgow County, Kentucky.
Interesting. I did not know that, actually.
It is a fun fact. A lot of people assume, Illinois, land of Lincoln. That's not true. It's where he's buried. That's where he served in the Illinois militia. That's where he was a state congressman. Okay. As we know, there's state senators, state house. He was a state house representatives member in the year 1847. Excuse me. Is that right? Excuse me. 1834, he was a state house member.
I was like 47.
Excuse me. 1847, he was a congressman from Illinois.
Okay. Yep.
Excuse me.
Sounds right.
I apologize.
No, you're good.
But remember, he was elected in 1834. 1839, math. 25 years old. He was an elected representative of the state of Illinois at 25.
Very young.
Very young. A lot of people think Lincoln old-timey. Guy was an old man.
Yes.
Famously.
Had the suit, top hat.
Mm-hmm. The little scruffy-looking beard.
Yes.
No one could pull the beard off like him.
No.
He famously was assassinated at the Ford Theater. And it was very tragic and horrible. 56 years old.
Only.
56 years old.
Okay.
Not even retirement age.
No.
56 years old.
Switch those two numbers around and he might be retirement age. But
a lot of people, I was just mystified by that. I had never really looked at that. He was elected to a second term in 1865, the 16th president of the United States. He died at 56 years old. In 56 years, he served as a state representative, member of the House of Representatives, as a lawyer before that, as the president during the Civil War. He was elected to 2 terms, and he's a legend.
One of the founding members of the Republican Party as well.
Yes, a lot of people don't know. The Republican Party hasn't always been a fixture of the United States. Abraham Lincoln was one of the first Republicans. Republicans at the time, however, were considered liberals by the modern thinking.
Yes.
In modern terms, which they did not use back then, for the record. He would have been considered a liberal, and the Democrats would have been considered conservatives in the most basic of political senses. But, and the reason, and obviously, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, which reads that all states in active rebellion against the Union, against the North, would be forced to relinquish the property rights to any enslaved persons or holdings. Which, fun fact, 2 states, I believe it was Tennessee and Missouri, border states, they were southern states. They were slave states because there were slave and free states back then.
I believe they weren't technically affiliated on either side entirely, though.
Exactly. They were neutral. They were neutral states. Technically, the slaves in those states were not freed by the executive order. However, they heard the news and they got out of Dodge pretty quick. I would have done the same.
Missouri at the time was under mostly Union control too, as Grant had successfully taken over the Mississippi.
Yeah, you got to talk about Grant.
Yes.
The figure of Lincoln, he's larger than life. Born to Thomas and Nancy Lincoln in Kentucky. I just want to talk about the man a little bit. He was born in a log cabin, frontier in Kentucky. At age 7, he moved to Indiana, I believe.
I believe so.
In Indiana. And that's where he grew up. His father was a very enigmatic character, descended from wealth and power, but he himself never earned it. He bought a ton of land in Kentucky, but the reason they were forced to move was actually because they got into property disputes with the local government.
Okay.
And they confiscated almost all of his land. So they didn't have anything to farm on. They were farmers.
Early America.
Yeah, it was a weird ordeal. And they were forced to move. He had 2 siblings. Yes, 2 siblings. An older sister and a younger brother. His mother died when he was 9 years old. And then his sister, who was 11, ended up becoming, the woman of the house. They still had that sort of dichotomy back then. She was the woman of the house, and his younger brother, Abraham, he was Abraham. 9-year-old Abe hung out at the house, and then he had an orphan cousin as well, Dennis, that lived with him. It wasn't his brother.
Dennis.
I know, it's
fucking
the
Dennis.
name seems so out of place.
That's such a like moderately modern name.
It's Sister Sarah, Abe, and then Dennis.
Dennis.
Who was actually Nancy, his mother's cousin, who lived with them. And but eventually, 10 years later, his sister would die. So his mother died at 9. His sister died when he was 19, and his father was a bit of a curmudgeon, bit of an enigmatic figure. I mean, he lost all of his holdings. They moved from Kentucky to Indiana.
Wife dies.
Well, yes, his wife died. He was from money, but he didn't have much money. And Lincoln was obviously affected by all this, but it didn't stop him. He was self-educated. A lot of people know that. Taught himself how to read and write.
Yes.
Guy's just an amazing success story. And
most definitely.
Another interesting thing about him, he spoke very public. He was a very good public speaker, public orator. And those speeches that we know best, the Gettysburg Address, for example.
Yes.
A House Divided speech.
Yep.
I believe that was in the State of the Union. He gave that speech.
Yes, he did. Yes.
He just mystified us with his words, and he would quote Scripture. He'd quote from the Bible quite a bit.
Yes, he would.
His parents were both very religious, and they were both they're members of a Baptist church that was against slavery, which influenced Abe quite a bit. He was never considered an abolitionist. However, he was against slavery.
I mean, you can obviously see that he was,
Yeah.
slightly an abolitionist. He got rid of a little bit of things.
Yes, he was never a member of the organized movement. He was considered a moderate, which was part of the reason why he won the elections both times.
Yes.
He got a lot of support from the South. He selected Andrew Johnson, the eventual 17th president of the United States, as a Southern Democrat to be his vice presidential running mate because he wanted to appeal to the South. He didn't want the South to feel alienated by him. He wanted, he grew up, he was born in Kentucky, a slaveholding state.
Indiana's kind of dicey. You can see why they
got Gary there?
Yeah, you can see why they might be okay with him.
I know I'm kind of bouncing around on topics. The political service, the personal life. He's just so riveting to me. I'm a bit of a fanboy, a bit of a Lincoln fanboy. I'll admit it. But all that being said, he is considered by most as the greatest president of the United States in American history. And people just hear that. A lot of people just write it off. They're like, oh, yep, he's the best. He's on the $5 bill. He must be the best. He's on the penny. He must be the best. He's on Mount Rushmore.
He is.
Must be the best. A lot of universities, cities have statues of him. But this also leads to controversy that many people in the South don't like him. He was killed almost immediately after he won his second election. There were detractors, to say the least.
Yes.
And because of his fame, because of his prestige, he is seen in a negative light by some. And recently, in recent history, there's been this kind of, discussion, debate about Lincoln, about who he is.
Movement, in a way.
Yes. And I think it's important to discuss his true self. So I wanted to gush a little bit about the man and about, his accomplishments, of which we know. 13th Amendment abolished slavery. 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws. That was due to the Congress, the radical Republicans, his allies, as well as him and his, perhaps you could say, duplicitous dealings. This is shown mostly factually in the film Lincoln, where he may or may not have sent people to bribe and or coerce certain individuals to vote on these amendments. That changed the course of the history of the United States.
Can't fault him for that, however. Very common thing.
It was a common thing at the time.
Yes.
It was a different world. It was only 150 years ago. His Gettysburg Address, famously, 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth onto this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and committed to the ideal that all men are created equal. Beautiful. 77 years ago. 87 years ago. That was 87 years. That's like one person after the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And then after that, since then, 1865, it was only 160 years after that. That's 2 people. The United States has only been around for 3 people. It's just boggles the mind. But we remember him fondly. I do, anyway. But some people don't. Some people see, well, he wasn't an abolitionist. He wasn't in the public eye saying, I'm against slavery, I'm against it. Famously, a lot of people know this quote, if he could keep slavery and save the Union, he would do it. It was in a letter that he wrote during the proceedings to the Civil War. He wanted to do everything he could to maintain the Union because he believed in the ideal of the Founding Fathers, that the United States, the colonies that became the United States, were strongest together. And he thought that a war would cripple the nation and would only hurt us, and he was partially right about that.
Absolutely.
But the war needed to happen in order for justice to be served in some small way to enslaved persons in the South.
I believe he had anything in what he was trying to do was to stop the war from happening, find a way to abolish slavery through government action. However, he was forced by the hand of the South to commit to a war, whereas he would have pursued a abolitionist ideology if he if there was a proper government.
Yes, he was a very savvy politician. Obviously, he was elected to president twice. It's not something that you do. Well, maybe for some people in the modern age, it's something that you just do. But back then, it was a pretty corrupt system. I mean, only white men could vote.
White landowning men.
Yes. It was a lot of elitism, and he was seen by some as a bumpkin. I mean, he was very well spoken and educated, and quoted scripture, often quoted the Constitution and other deep passages from collected fiction. But he was still an outsider in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And he wasn't loved for that. But we love him now. Well, some people do. That's what I'm getting to. He wasn't a strict abolitionist. He is quoted as to have said there was freedom fighters, civil rights activists at the time. Stephen Douglas being the most famous among them. Yep. Excuse me, Frederick Douglass. Stephen Douglas was the his famous adversary in Illinois politics. Okay. That's a different person. Frederick Douglass, one of the most famous among them, a freed former slave, a famous, persuasive political writer and abolitionist. However, there were other members of the abolitionist movement, specifically freed black men, who saw that the South was beyond saving, that the United States was beyond saving for black Americans, and that they wanted to leave. There was a minority, but a plural minority, a plurality of people who wanted to organize and head back to Africa.
There was a government... There was government sanction and the buying of, I believe it is Liberia, in the coast of Africa. We will put it simply, it was not a good idea to send people back there. As it really turned into a very shitty place for the native Africans there. Liberia has a dodgy history.
Well, I mean, yes, the history of the continent of Africa is vast and cannot be nearly approached by us in this short period of time. But there was a small movement of individuals who wanted to be packaged up and sent back. They were like, we can't find any reason to stay here. We're treated like garbage, and everyone hates us. And Abraham Lincoln was quoted one time in support of this movement. He spoke with some of those leaders, and because Abraham Lincoln, at his core, was a negotiator, a man who wanted compromise. He didn't want the war. The war tore him apart. He wanted to reach a compromise, reach a consensus. He wanted to seek problem solve, and he did approach this as a solution, but eventually it didn't work, and the war happened. So he saw an opportunity for the Emancipation Proclamation, and eventually to use the fact that the Southern states were no longer voting to push through some legislation that was in favor of black Americans being able to vote and be free. And then lastly, something that cannot go unsaid, Thomas Lincoln, Abraham's father, witnessed the murder of his own father.
Oh, wow.
Abraham Lincoln's grandfather. Abraham Lincoln's grandfather was killed during they were called Indian raids, Native American raids. Yep. In the 1800s, it was still very common for fights and skirmishes to break out between native peoples and
go on for almost 100 years as well.
And white peoples, yes, and white Americans, and European Americans. And his grandfather was killed in one of these skirmishes in front of his father. And this naturally led his father to perhaps not be too keen on Native Americans, which obviously we do not think is okay. But again, this was the 1810, 1805.
Yes,
I mean,
this is history. You can't fault us for.
I'm just telling you how it was.
Yes,
this is what they were doing, and Abraham Lincoln served in the state militia of Illinois, and during his time there, he fought in some skirmishes against Native peoples in Illinois. There were Native people still in Illinois. Most of those states weren't founded as states of the United States until 1840s.
Yeah.
So
Territories,
1830s, I mean, it was barely an organization at that point. And there was still, I mean, the United States was going through a massive expansion, imperial expansion, let's call it what it was,
yes,
of the United States, the Union, fighting westward against Native peoples, kicking them out of their lands, killing them.
And the Spanish and the Mexicans and the British and the French. Everyone under the sun in America.
Oh, yeah, we were going down the list.
Throwing hands where we could.
And that led to Abraham Lincoln, in his life, being responsible for the deaths of many Native Americans. Via his military actions as a leader, via executions of Native Americans for crimes they may or may not have committed. And that is obviously deplorable and condemnable. But that being said, I think this is a quote from Doctor Who, so don't make me
God, or even quoting so even worse.
Don't make me feel, don't at me, but I think everyone's life is a basket of good things and a basket of bad things. And I think Abraham Lincoln's basket was a lot more good things than bad. And I don't think anyone's perfect. I don't think that's possible for people to be perfect. But I think he embodies the American spirit of industriousness and hardworkingness, and his life was filled with
freedom. I believe he truly embodies that ideology.
He wants to be, for people to be free,
yes,
and for people to work through things together.
Yes.
And I think denouncing him is foolhardy and wrong and uneducated.
I agree.
And that's what I wanted to say about him. So thanks. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I was trying something out. It was
worth the go.
Yeah, I was just trying to. All right. So those are our presidents that we decided to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed that. But now it's time for the real shit.
See, now that you said this, I'm going to place this in front of everything.
Gonna fuck me up. Well, we were just kind of touching on it, but the United States has been in a lot of conflicts, especially with each other, with other nations surrounding us, and Native Americans. And Native Americans fought valiantly, fought desperately, fought quite a bit for the entire history of the United States.
Yes.
Up until recently, only recently has there been relative peace between the United States and the Native American peoples.
Yeah, only maybe 60 years at most. At most.
But we could probably do an entire 17,000 episodes on the American Indians. But something that I thought would be directly applicable to presidents would be the Curse of Tippacanoe. Do. See, I'm trying the sounds and they're just not flowing off the tongue.
Sound bites.
Okay, well, work in progress. The Curse of Tippacanoe, also known as the Tecumseh's Curse, the 20-year curse, or the Zero Curse, is a little-known urban legend in the United States of America. And it is connected to the deaths in office of presidents of the United States whom were elected in years that end in the digit 0. Okay? So like most people know, every 4 years, the United States has a presidential election.
Yes.
Okay? So that means starting when it did, every 4 times 5, 20 years, it's going to be another 0 year. For example, we had an election in 2020. We had one in 2000, and then it goes back to 1980, 1940. The Curse of Tippacanoe is so named because it happened as a result, many claim, of William Henry Harrison, the beginner, the actuator, the starter of Tecumseh's Curse, the Curse of Tippacanoe.
Okay.
In 1811. Now, he was the governor of the then Indiana Territory. And there was a battle in Prophettsville, modern-day Prophettsville, Indiana, in which Tecumseh, the noted Shawnee leader, was the chief of the Shawnee. His brother, I'm going to butcher his name, I'm sorry. Tenskwatawa was he was known as, it means like he who makes a big noise. He who makes a loud noise.
I've heard of him. Yes. This is we could do a whole podcast.
Don't tease the people. Tenskwatawa, his brother, Tecumseh's younger brother, was left in charge of Prophettsville because Tecumseh was away. Tecumseh was rallying a sort of Indian confederacy to fight against the white Americans, the Europeans.
The emergent United States.
The emergent United States in 1811. This is before the War of 1812. This is before the Mexican-American War. This is early. And Tenskwatawa and his men fought valiantly. It was a small skirmish. However, 50 Americans died and 50 Native Americans died as well. And the Americans were successful. I'm sorry, I'll be exact. 62 Americans killed, 126 wounded, 36 known natives dead, an estimated 70 to 80 wounded, and 1 prisoner of war was taken. It's pretty gruesome for a small skirmish.
Slightly Pyrrhic victory for the United States for a very small amount of land.
And yes, in the United States, burned Prophettsville to the ground, and anyone who wasn't killed or wounded scattered.
Yes.
But William Henry Harrison, the governor, was celebrated for this win, for striking at the heart of Tecumseh's force. And this led to Tecumseh again, the brother of Tenskwatawa, his confederacy never really gaining power back as a Confederate leader for the native people. That this really broke him. And his brother, Tenskwatawa, who was seen as a spiritual leader, he was not a fighter, but he went into exile in Canada. He fled shortly after this. And wow, cut that out.
Good.
I just had it brain dead. And as a result, William Henry Harrison was given the nickname Tippecanoe, because Tippecanoe was the county in which this battleground took place. Okay. He was Tippecanoe, and over the next 20 years, his political career grew, and he was elected president in the year 1840. Now, why did I say all this? What is this curse? What are you talking about, Max? You're going all over the place. What the hell do you mean? William Henry Harrison, elected president 1840. He died a year later, 1841, pneumonia. Max, that's total coincidence. Is it total coincidence?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Well, the reason, Tenskwatawa was a spiritual man. He's rumored to have put a curse on Tippecanoe, a curse on William Henry Harrison, and that every president following him would have some sort of curse. And the only commonality between those that follow him would be maybe that they were elected in a year ending in 0. It's a bit of a weird goalpost moving urban legend.
Yeah,
but
I read a little bit about it, and that they think it could be only those divisible by 0 or 20 as well. And
yes, and that is the common criticism. But hear me out. 1840, William Henry Harrison elected, died 1841 in office of pneumonia. 1860, 20 years later, President Abraham Lincoln, elected president, died 1865, assassinated in office. Oh, wow, that's 2. That's nothing. Oh, yeah? 1880, James A. Garfield, elected president of the United States. September 19th, 1881, assassinated in office. That's 3. Again, 1900, William McKinley, elected president of the United States, assassinated September 14th, 1901. 1920, well, another 20 years, man, this is really going.
Yeah.
Warren G. Harding, August 2nd, 1923, heart attack in office, dead. 1940, Franklin D. Roosevelt, elected president of the United States, died 1945, cerebral hemorrhage. 1960, John F. Kennedy, assassinated. That makes it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 presidents in a row died in office in a year.
7 out of 45.
Yes, it makes it, by percentage, president of the United States is the most hazardous job in America.
Oh, yeah.
Because imagine if you went to work and 1 out of 7 people, give or take, it's like 14% of people died doing your job. Would you do that job? No. But that's president. That's president, people. It was only broken by Ronald Reagan in the year 1980. He was elected, And he did not die in office. He died 20 years later of pneumonia and Alzheimer's in his bed with his family. Not a super pleasant way to go, but... Oh, wait. What did you say, Max? You didn't say anything. Well, that's because I read your mind. Ronald Reagan was shot, people. He was shot. He did not die. Ronald Reagan was shot coming out of his car. And the assassination attempt was levied on him.
He was severely wounded for 3 months, I believe.
Yes.
Because of that shooting.
It's astonishing. It's just an astonishing amount of coincidences.
Yes.
And those are the only presidents that were ever in life-threatening peril. None of the other ones died in office.
After Ronald Reagan, however, George Bush had a live grenade thrown at him in an attempt to assassinate him. However, it did not go off. Otherwise, it would have just skipped Ronald Reagan for some reason. However, it did.
But yes, it seems that Tenskwatawa's curse, Tecumseh's curse, the curse of Tippecanoe, might have fizzled out. But it's still astonishing that 7 presidents in a row died in office after being elected in a year ending in 0. Starting with Henry Harrison.
Wife also brought in psychics and mediums to try and combat the curse.
She knew about the curse.
Yes, she truly believed that she could stop this curse by using these mediums to essentially kind of divert it away from her husband. She officially brought in these people, believing they would help him.
Well, I mean, that is our little History 101 on the Curse of Tippecanoe. And that begs the question, my friend. It is the year 2022. We have a president that was elected in the year 2020. Joe Biden. Is he next on the chopping block? For the record, I know you can't see, but Max is like fleeing the room. He's like, "Oh my God, we're gonna get flagged and we're gonna get shot by the Secret Service." Anyway, but it's worth mentioning that this curse seems to have abated. It seems that the mediums that Nancy Reagan brought in, because as many people know, the United States presidents they have a chaplain. You know, at best, it's not a very religious position, but at best, you'll see that the president go to church or something. Most presidents are Protestant. There's been 2 Catholic presidents. Otherwise, every other president has been either non-denominational or deist or Christian in some manner.
Yes.
So mediums in the White House is quite risque.
Yes.
And Nancy Reagan brought in mediums because she was so convinced that this curse was going to kill her husband. And she was almost right in that he was shot, nearly killed.
Yes.
This curse, and people need to know about it, because if crazy shit happens, I don't want people knowing that, how could anyone see this happen? Get aware.
Predicted.
Get aware.
Yes.
Get aware of the curse.
Keep your eyes open.
You look out there, and being president's a dangerous job, man. There's curses. There's riots.
Bullets.
There's bullets.
There's a lot of bullets.
But all we can do is, hope that Nancy abated the curse, and
we'll see by the end of 2024.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe sooner. Oops.
That'll just about wrap this up for today. It was a pleasure having you with us.
Hope it was weird enough for you.
Catch you guys next time. Homework. Song of the week. Shots. LMFAO featuring Lil Jon. For no other reason other than the title definitely is nothing.
There's no coincidence whatsoever.
No, just
stop reading into it.
Yeah,
Stop.
Yes, stop. Just shots. Learn it. Love it. Do you want to add anything? Peace out, bitches.